The reason why we've created this webinar specifically is because we get a lot of questions from our network about how do we practically manage our teams in this dislocated environment. You know, we're so used to going into the office, being able to physically connect with our teams and our staff, that the idea of remote connectivity or remote management of teams it's foreign, it's difficult. And we've been thrust into this situation without a formal change management process, without a strategy, without a plan. And the situation is just said, hey, no, it's time. And, you know, the hardest thing about not having a strategy is then you're reactionary, which makes things really, really difficult. So that's the context and the premise behind why we've created this webinar. So firstly, thank you all for tuning in. There is an abundance of online content out there about resilience and managing teams and all that. So from myself and the team at 8 Mile and the speakers, we're so grateful that you've taken the time to tune in to us and listen to what we have to say. Can I ask that you keep your microphones on mute unless we push out to questions if we have time? However, Sam, our marketing manager, is running the chat room. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them if we can, and she'll provide some responses there. We are extremely lucky, and you know, at the 8 Mile, we've been talking about this webinar for a while, to get 2 subject matter experts who have not only built a capability around working remotely, but also have the background and the pedigree from working in high-level organizations, everything from, you know, military, Virgin Australia, the Emporium, you know, Pacific, all these sorts of organizations at each level. So we're talking about strategic in the boardroom, all the way down to getting in the weeds and actually implementing these strategies at the grassroots. So face-to-face with clients, with staff, with team members, with executives, actually moving and shaking and making this stuff happen. So I count us and the team very lucky to have them here. Specifically, we've got Tim, the owner, founder, CEO of BenchOn, ex-military officer, and a pretty good one at that, if I do say so myself. Once he transitioned from the military, went into a directing role in business development and strategic management at another high corporate, just to round out the profile, Tim, you know, overachiever. And then he created BenchOn because he saw a gap, and the gap was underutilization in the Australian corporate environment. Now, when we talk about underutilization, it costs the Australian economy millions, if not billions, having idle staff within organisations not able to fulfil a lot of workload because the contracts don't exist. And then you have other organisations where they have an excess of contracts but not enough staff to fill the role. So what Tim does is creates a platform where they can share in a subcontract arrangement, getting those staff and putting them to use, right? The parent company still maintains the payroll, super, and the administration burn, and they keep their corporate knowledge, right? And the receiving entity gets the expertise. And, you know, these companies are validated, they're verified by Tim and his team. And it's an absolutely fantastic platform. And I think it's, you know, it's a credit to you, Tim, that you've also pushed this to the national level, where you're currently working on a government-sponsored national business talent sharing portal, which, mate, that's fantastic, you know, benefit Australian commercial environment to no end. So thanks for being here. And Anita, you know, how do you give Anita an intro? She's got probably one of the best histories in the people and culture space. Sorry, I don't mean to make you blush, Anita, but you know, I can't help myself sometimes. a self-professed word nerd, but is a unicorn in the fact that she can actually communicate as well. So can delve down into your tender processes, into strategy development, HR business partner, implementations, like you name it, that whole people and culture space and the whole gamut and spectrum from strategic all the way down to tactical. Anita's across it. She can do it both in the building of the strategy and the implementation, which means dealing with people. And in her capacity at the moment as the owner of Mindful People, she goes through the full process of end-to-end strategy, but also finding the right talent to suit the strategic needs of organizations. That's her bag. And everything from CV process, like CV creation, interview training, you know, building the strategy for both individuals and organizations. Anita, my hat off to you. You've got the attention span so much greater than what I've got. And it's a credit to you being able to do what you do. So thank you again for taking the time out to be here.
Pleasure.
Um,
Thanks.
I think I need to stop talking and get into the guest.
Job of it,
and get into the guests, because you guys are absolute superstars and people are sick of hearing from me from the last few webinars. This is a new world, right? It's a new world for a lot of people, not so much for the speakers here and, you know, the team at the 8th Mile, but it's a new world for a lot of people out here. Like I said before, they've been thrust into a situation that potentially they don't understand. They're not technically kitted out to work through, and it's a new skill set. It's a brave new world, and we've been forced to decentralize our control, and that's foreign to some people. And, you know, we're trying to find a balance between trust and freedom, and not going the other way into the micromanagement space where we actually, you know, create anxiety in our teams and managing our teams. So this is the perfect time to cut over to Anita, and I'd love to get your opinion, you know, with the background that you've got in training executives, implementing strategies and those sort of things. What is the importance? Is there an importance on managing expectations of leadership, but also looking at the empathetic side of leadership and understanding our people?
Yeah, thanks, Jono. Look, I'm a big one for KPIs, and definitely a huge one for very clearly defining your expectation of your team. If we don't know what we're aiming for, how are we supposed to get there within the time frame, but on the empathetic side of things, and we had such a good beginning chat about this the other day, Tim and Jono, I loved it. But that balance between expectation and empathy is just so important if you're looking to encourage a high-performing team that also collaborates and communicates well together. A really common roadblock to achieving this, and one that I am frequently in discussions with other leaders, particularly in the heavy industry, such as manufacturing, industrial, etc., is that trust piece. It can be really tough for some, but Sam and I were speaking earlier about the fact that that's perfectly okay if that's difficult for some. It doesn't have to come naturally to you. Even the greatest of leaders, and each of us, have trusted unwisely before, and we therefore carry that experience through with us. So it's okay to put your hand up and ask for support internally, externally, from myself as to how to overcome that roadblock. If you can harness the ability to trust your team, and again, it goes both ways, it's not just from the leader, it does open up the doors to be able to delegate, to rely on your team, to build that really cohesive, well-oiled machine, which we all would love in our teams. But given that we're in a time at the moment where we are, as you perfectly put, Jono, thrust into this, bam, we're working from home, when we've gone, you know, we're getting our coffee in the morning, we're driving to work, we get there, we say hi to our colleagues, we sit down, and that's our workstation for the day. We're visible to our boss, and vice versa. So alleviating that anxiety of working from home in terms of reporting up to your boss is something that's that I'd like to talk a bit about today. Just as an example, before Tim, I want to hand over to you to share that great example you gave the other day.
The couch and trackpads.
From army life to working from home, and that sort of adjustment for you. That was such a great share. As leaders, I suppose, imagine you're the employee sitting at home, and you've woken up in the morning in your new working from home environment. You might have kids that you're juggling. You're trying to make a coffee while they're running around under your feet, and out you go to sit at your newly created workstation, and your boss calls. And they say, okay, how'd you go with everything yesterday? What's happening with this client? Okay, yep. What are you going to achieve today? Excellent, great. You can tell they're not really listening. They're just ticking a box and writing down your achievements so that they can call you back at 4 o'clock and hold you accountable to them, which is great, but there's a way to do that that's a little bit more effective. When that phone call ends, the employee can be left feeling, you know, that they've not been properly checked in with. They feel anxious, and occasionally they can feel demotivated from a phone call like that. So if you're the manager that phones and you know, 8 o'clock, how are you going? How are you adjusting to working from home? Have you got a workstation set up that you're comfortable at? Is there anything you need from the office? What about support outside of that? Is it a, you know, safe working environment at home, etc.? How are you going with your goals this week? I know yesterday you shared that you were speaking with these clients. How did that go? Is there any support I can offer you as a leader? Let's just talk through your KPIs, goals and objectives for this week and make sure that you're getting the support you need to achieve those. Step through all your really meaty KPIs, make sure that they're achievable and agreed to from both sides. And then, yeah, finish the call by saying, look, have a great day. Good luck with everything. And let's check in around 4 o'clock. Does that work for you? Great. Hang up the call. That employees, they're feeling like they're supported. Yes, they've stepped through all those very important KPIs, but there's that undercurrent of empathy, which again, Jono, thanks for bringing that up. But Tim, do you want to share your story?
Yeah, no, that was really good.
I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, I think to add to that, if you look at both sides, right? As a business owner, the problem with remote working is trust. And like you said, you know, if you're a business owner, you're stuck at home, you're not out having meetings, you're not seeing your employees around the office. The first thing you think is, are my employees just sitting on the couch eating Doritos and just answering my calls and just going, haha, suckers, I'm not working, but, you know, I'm comfortable at home. Like, that is a normal reaction to someone who's never worked in this part. So you've got, the business owner has a lack of trust that's a natural response. But what you miss is on the other side, the employees have, I guess, unfounded guilt. And this comes to my story where I was talking about when I left the army. So in the army, obviously there's a routine that is very strict. You know exactly where you need to be, you know exactly what you need to do. If you're doing something new, there's a process for it. Like, it's just follow the bouncing ball. And when I left the army, I went into a position where I had full autonomy. I worked from home. And most of the time I just managed my own workload. But even though I was working from, say, 7 a.m. till, you know, lunch, and then I'd knock off for lunch and take a half an hour lunch break. And then my plan would then be to work through from 12:30 through to about 5 or 6. Even though I was actually working more hours than I would have if I was in an office, because there's no commute time, there's no switch off time. You haven't left work to come home, so you're always on. So unrealistically, I was working more hours. I was doing 12 to 14 hours a day. But at lunch, because I was sitting on my couch, eating something out of my fridge and watching a TV show, I felt like I was doing the wrong thing. Like, I felt like I was cheating my boss, because it just felt too comfortable. So you've got an employee who is pushing themselves to the limit, feeling guilty for every second they take off, but yet that's probably not realistic. And then you've got a boss on the other hand going, are they doing what it is? So what it leads to is this micromanagement style of leadership and management, where you're right, those phone calls do come in. Hey, what are you doing right now? Like, what happened this morning? Who have you met with? Because they're not just in the office next door where you have these conversations, and those conversations would be completely normal. If your boss popped their head into your office and said, hey, how'd you go in that meeting this morning? You'd be like, oh, really good. No worries.
Crushed it.
Yeah. If they ring you when you're at home, it's like, they don't believe that I'm doing anything. They're trying to micromanage and tell me what to do. Like, it's a complete switch in the way people think. And that, I think the first step in managing your team remotely is understanding those, you know, conflicting views and how people feel, and then being able to set a process in place that addresses that.
Well, no, it's normal, mate. You raised an amazing point there. Like, the feelings are normal. Like, it's, you know, and you could be in the most high performing team in the world, and if you've been physically connected for such a period of time, you've come to rely on being able to read body cues, read body language, and those sort of things. We've taken that away by putting it into a digital sense, effectively, and that's our connection. So those feelings are normal. Understanding the feelings are normal, but acting on them is a different thing altogether.
Employees almost need to give themselves a little pep talk in the morning when they get up. Am I good at my job? Yes, I am. Am I achieving my objectives that I need to as per KPIs agreed to? Yeah, I'm on track. I'm feeling good. Put on that, great soundtrack music, Rocky, whatever it is. I don't know what everyone's personal track is. I've just given mine away.
Ibiza's Sax on Fire.
But just to, I think, build that sense of achievement and accountability within ourselves, to then be able to manage up and calmly have those conversations, given that this is particularly a time where there's a call for greater transparency around activity each and every day, which can in itself leave employees feeling a little bit anxious given that they're not used to it. So
and it's new, and everyone's dealing with it at the same time. You know, it's a worldwide situation. You know, everyone's feeling these things, and you know, it's great to have yourself and Tim on here to be able to go, you know, you guys are leaders in what you do. Like, you guys are phenomenal in your business life and your professional life and your personal lives. You know, you've got this stuff sorted, but you still understand those feelings and understand those reactions. So, you know, what an opportunity to shed some light that it's normal and it's okay. But what it does is it draws attention to the responsibility of leadership in managing expectations. And that's why I've just kicked over the slide. There's certain things that we can do as leaders to manage expectations of our staff. You know, we have to model the behavior that we expect from our staff. And we go a long way into removing that anxiety by providing a framework of expectations and things down. You give a box so that people can think outside of it, but they can work to their boundaries and their limits, and it actually enables them rather than restricts them. And we'll mention that before, especially in a high performing team, they understand that those boundaries and that framework is not a restrictor. And I think this is really important. Tim, you know, with your background in the military, right, how much freedom did you feel like you had, even though you had a schedule to work to? Like, you knew what was coming up, you knew what was expected of you, but you could also think outside that on how, you know, you were going to step at the next level. I mean, what do you think, mate? Is it important to build some sort of framework and manage those expectations as a leader?
Yeah, routine, while it dictates what you do, it actually frees you up. Now, there was a really good quote by Mark Zuckerberg that said he wears the exact same shirt and the exact same jeans every day because he doesn't want to waste a mental thought on what he has to wear that day. He wants to keep his brain focused on what's next and those higher complex tasks. And that's exactly what a routine does. And that is how I got over, because our business has been run remotely forever, since the start. And the lessons I learned when I was in a remote job was how I set up the business. And that is exactly what I use to deal with the anxiety, to deal with the isolation, and to free up my mind to be able to think to those higher level considerations that I needed to do. So I actually got to the point where when I first started this business, I went into an anxiety spiral. There were so many options. I think with so many options that you can do, that is actually constricting on your mental state. Like you feel a lot of pressure because there is endless possibilities. Whereas if you set your routine and it's dictated, you know then that you're going to achieve everything you need to achieve this week. So you're not worried. There's no worry that you won't get things done because it's planned in and it's blocked out. But it can come down to simple things in your routine can bring your team closer together. So what we instituted was at the start of the day when I expected everyone to start, and we've always had this theory of, you know, as long as your work gets done, I don't care when you work. If you need to take 2 hours off from 2 till 4 to go and handle your kids at school, then do that. But just make sure you get your work done when you get back. You know, like there's freedom there. But at the start of the day at 8:30, we put a message out on Slack because that's how we communicate. Good morning, everyone. How are you? You know, this is what's been happening in the company at a strategic level. I hope you all smash it today. And I think as a company, these should be our priorities. And even just that welcome message and people jumping on and going, hey, good morning, everyone. You know, it creates this immediate sense of we're on deck. We're together here as a team. And now we're about to push forward. And so simple things like that can actually have a really profound effect. And knowing that at 11 o'clock every day, we have our tech stand up and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we have our BD stand up. And, you know, I know that my BD questions will be answered at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I don't need to worry about them now. And that frees up a lot, I guess, a lot of effort.
And that's the difference between a high performing team and an average team, right? You know, you're setting a framework and people trust in the process, they trust in the communication, and you've built that rapport within the team that they understand everyone is approaching this thing from a position of love, care, and they've put the team above self. And, you know, they're not taking everything personally. They're orientating everything to the team because the reputation of the team is so important. That's what stands out about BenchOn as as a company. I think I've said that numerous times. So thanks for that, Tim. I appreciate it.
And I just want to address Andrew. Andrew put a comment on there saying, isn't this about, treating our employees as adults and therefore having, a sense of maturity and all of that. And I completely agree with you, Andrew. And I think it goes back to our point before, which is if they've never worked remotely too, then they're struggling. And it takes some leadership and maybe some framework to bring everyone together so that you feel comfortable as a team. It's certainly not about micromanaging, and it's certainly not about giving them parental supervision. It's about leading them to the productivity that they need to achieve in order for them to feel like they've contributed to the business, as well as put their own experience into how the business operates, and they feel like they're contributing.
Yeah, that's a solid point, Tim, and I completely agree.
I've just had to relocate because somebody upstairs has decided to start drilling, it appears. So I just took you for a little walk through my house there. So thankfully I'd put my washing away, right?
The wonderful world we live in, Anita. I think that's what everyone was waiting for. They were waiting for a tour around the house and to show a bit of friction and all that. That's what the team needed. So, guys, we spoke about managing expectations, setting those expectations, maintaining routines. However, all you have to understand is that this situation's could be said that it's unprecedented, but for those people that have built businesses working from home, it's not as much, but the scale of the situation is unprecedented. So even basic technical issues create uncertainty within our teams. Any of those gaps or breakdowns in communication, they stress people out. They make people anxious. And, new tech, new software, without the ability to do hands-on training, hands-on implementation, we're expecting a lot from our teams. And I know we've had, Sam and I were talking about it earlier, we've had people within webinars go, I've just been put into a position where I now have to teach and run packages online. And I don't have the equipment. I don't have the know-how with the software. I don't know how to do it. And the company and the leadership is not providing that expertise. Now, responsibilities as leaders mean that, we have to work to ensure the comfort of our team and look at what they need, not so much what they want, but what they need in order to function as a team. I think that's important. There's a lot more uncertainty in the leadership side of the house where we're looking at how long is this going to last? What's the future of work going to look like? And how protracted is this going to be? Are we going to be working remotely for forever? Which, we probably won't. That's the situation. But Anita, your background in organizational change and the whole recruitment side of the house, you have a really great perspective on this. So how important is that clear, calm, deliberate and consistent communication from leadership? And what are the things we should be saying and doing with our teams to sort of combat that uncertainty?
I think it's incredibly important to, as I said before, very clearly define our expectations as leaders. When I was working for one of the most stunning hotels in Brisbane, as you can imagine, within hospitality, there's a lot of, and that was in a people and culture manager capacity, just to clarify, but there's a lot of young leaders, for example, across hospitality. And so for me, it was about supporting them, setting them up for success with that ability to manage their teams and feel comfortable doing so. So clearly defined expectations from us as leaders in terms of daily, weekly, monthly goals, individually, as well as how that contributes to our team, but to the overarching business goal. So really that transparency piece is exceptionally important as well. It is great to share that info with your team. It helps them to feel engaged in the business. They sit there and look to you as a leader, as somebody who sees it as important that they share that information with their team. So again, share the daily, weekly, monthly goals of individual, the team, and the overarching business plan. Conversations with increased questioning around employee support, their wellbeing and roadblocks are definitely things that we need to be doing at the moment. Usually, as you guys were pointing out before so beautifully, and Tim, how you said, you're used to coming into the office, you sit down, that's your work day, everybody's visible. So for a lot of leaders, they wouldn't have needed to have had those conversations before about how are you going? how are you going working from home? Or, you know, how's life outside of work? You just don't, a lot of the time, you don't need to or think to ask those questions. So that can, as leaders, make us feel just a little bit anxious or uncomfortable about, you sort of think, oh, can I ask that? So from a HR perspective, yes, you can. You can ask if your team are okay. It's, look, accountability, action and empathy, all very important things. So very clearly defined KPIs. At this point in time with working from home where people are struggling, Jono, as you were saying, with technology, I have never been so comfortable with video meetings in my entire life. I also haven't connected with some of my interstate partners as much as I am at the moment. I mean, it'd be a lot of emails, phone calls, etc. Whereas now, before I go to pick up the phone or send that email, I'm like, I'm going to see if, you know, Joe from South Australia's got just quick 5 minutes for a face-to-face chat, and it's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. So I think that that whilst there's been some adjustments for all, there's been some positive takeaways from this time of working from home for lots of people too. But I'll stop talking now.
We've definitely seen while we've seen a drop in physical connection, I think there's definitely been an increase in connections overall. And, you know, people are working on their communication and across all gamut, both written, visual, you know, auditory, all of it. And I think that's been fantastic. I want to quickly chunk up for a second into that strategic space and talk from a leadership perspective. You know, when we talk about uncertainty, we look at future of work, not knowing how long this thing's going to last. There's a tendency for some people to bury their heads in the sand and go, you know, I'm just going to wait this out until, you know, it goes back to normal. Well, I think the idea of normal has changed. So when we look at building redundancy to, you know, support removing that uncertainty in a leadership space, I'll cut over to Tim here, because there's a very real risk when people are thinking about job security, redundancy, and, you know, the initial reaction for a lot of companies is to go, well, I need to cut staff, because if I cut staff, the bottom line's still going to look okay. But what they're not looking at is how much it's going to cost to get staff back in, to rebuild that corporate knowledge, to rebuild that understanding. And that's where I think, Tim, you have a really good perspective on this, because that's what your company does. So how important is it to build redundancy at the strategic space, but then communicate that to your teams that this is what we're doing and this is what the future of work is going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of uncertainty, and at the moment, we're planning as a company on this style of working until November. We will plan for that, because we know how to switch back if it does switch back, and that's the case. But we're planning till November, and if you remember, the PM actually said in the early days that this could go right through till November, and we're not seeing that change anytime soon. So we've planned for that length, but you're right in the sense that you're burying your head in the sand at this point is going to be extremely detrimental the longer this goes on, and it's important that you look at it, you know. And when, like I said, this company has been remote ever since, and when coronavirus happened, our staff said, well, what do we do? And I said, just keep doing what you're doing and work from home, and just don't go out to the movies. But 4 years ago, when we set this up, we had a 6-month period where we were very engaged with our staff to explain, okay, this is going to be remote. You're going to be working from home. How are you feeling? How do you want us to set this up? How's the best way for us to communicate? And it was we included them in the planning. And by including them in the planning, we now have, I guess, a battle rhythm within the business that works for our employees and works for us, and that they're very comfortable with it. When it comes to, you know, cutting staff in this time because it's all about the bottom line, I mean, I have a very strong opinion on that, as you said, because that's what we're trying to prevent.
And that's what I want to hear too. I love the strong opinion from you, by the way. It's my favorite.
Well, we always say that cutting staff to save money is the same as saying, I need to lose weight quickly, so I'm going to cut off my leg. I mean, yeah, sure, you've lost weight, you're missing a leg, but now everything you do from here on out is going to be that much harder, you know? And that's exactly what it's like when you cut staff. You not only lose their corporate knowledge, it also affects your culture in industry, because people see you cutting staff. I mean, has anyone looked at Qantas and said, oh, geez, they look after their staff there? Like, no. Like they cut away 20,000 staff and just went, yeah, there you go, see ya. Like Those companies that do that have a cultural effect in industry. So you lose their corporate knowledge, you lose your reputation in industry as being a good employer, but also you gain additional costs. You've got employee turnover costs. You're going to have to recruit them back in 4 months or so, which is going to cost you recruitment fees, which will be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yep.
You've then got a period of sort of 6 months where those employees are operating at less than optimal level of productivity because they're still learning and they're still trying to work out what the job is. So by cutting staff now to save a few dollars, you're actually putting yourself in the next 12 months worth of pain in terms of productivity and financial performance. So a much better way of looking at this is saying, well, you know what? Employees are assets to my business. That's how we generate revenue. Without employees, my business doesn't operate. So why are you cutting away the one thing that helps your business grow and do what it needs to do? And that's why we tried to come up with another way to keep that and realize that there is economic value in having employees. There is social impact in keeping your employees in a stable environment. And that will actually boost your business in the long term, as well as bringing in additional revenue.
Yeah, definitely. And the government has sort of stepped up to the plate, and they've provided, things like a JobKeeper program. You find other ways of employing your people. I mean, that's what BenchOn does really well. Or, if you've been supplemented by a JobKeeper payment, but you've also looked at outsourcing and creating a subcontract arrangement with another organization that has an increase in contracts because they're in crisis management, they're in business continuity planning or something like that, staff are still usable. And if you can retain 75% of your revenue by JobKeeper and outsourcing, then you're still operational. I mean, it's just a different way of looking at things.
Yeah, and look, as this goes on and it goes on longer and longer, businesses are now realizing that we can't just hibernate for 7 months.
Yep.
We need to be productive right now. And you know what it's doing? It's changing that old perspective of, I need to see a bum in that seat doing that job. Yeah. And how many times, I don't know how many people on this call have actually been frustrated to hear that, where you go, I have the perfect person for you and they can do the task, but they're in Melbourne and you need them in Canberra, but we can do this for you. And they go, no, I want to see that person there, when there is absolutely zero requirement for them to be in that location. And that is just the old way of thinking. And what we're seeing is the olds and bolds who have never embraced technology or never embraced any type of remote working have suddenly realized for the last month and a half that they've been operating their business remotely from their computer at home and that it's actually achievable. And are they going to pay a premium to have someone in an office, in a chair doing something when they could be sitting on a beach? I don't care where they're sitting as long as the task gets done.
Yeah.
We've seen a 275% increase in remote work contracts that are going out to businesses. And I only expect that to increase. And when these sort of restrictions drop, I don't expect the remote work to completely drop back to where it was, which was sitting at around 3 to 5%.
Yep.
I actually think that we will still see around 30 to 40% remote work because people realize that this is a cost-saving measure. I can get the talent that I want, regardless of where they're located, to get the best outcome for my business. So in terms of uncertainty about the future, my prediction is that through this, we will see a much more balanced approach to remote versus in location. And businesses will be far more productive on a national scale, which leads to more collaboration opportunities.
Yeah, definitely.
These are the local businesses that I know.
I just want to cut quickly to a question that Andy has put in the chat about expectations from managers that now they're working from home and there's no, impost on commute and things like that. Are we expected to now run 24/7? Is it appropriate due to the way that work is changing and, there's some relaxation, or is it not appropriate? And I think this comes down to the balance. And like we were talking about before, with expectation management from your leaders, you need to be able to understand your people's family situations. You need to be able to understand your teams at that micro level and understand what is appropriate. For executives that work, 18-hour days or whatever, well, hey, you're working 18-hour days. Maybe you go to 15 because you're not driving an hour each way. But no, I think it's completely unreasonable to expect people to go to 24/7 and be, especially at team level, be contactable 24 hours a day. I think that's ludicrous. It's ridiculous, and it promotes anxiety and stress. And then you start removing the benefits of this sort of thing, working from home, which is you get to put the washing on, you get to see your kids, you get to do those sort of things, which makes you a better worker, makes you more engaged with your business when you come back in. I think it's completely, it's not acceptable to be putting that kind of impost on your team.
It definitely has to come from leaders. It's incredibly important to get on a call with your individual team members, or to have a, you know, group video conversation or whatever platform you want to do it in, but to say to them, my expectations are not that you work from sun up to sundown, day in, day out, because that increases your chance of burnout, even more so than when you're in the office. I'm guilty of that. You know, I'll get up in the morning, do a quick workout, coffee, sit down, and that's when I think my best is first thing in the morning. So, but then I can quite easily go late into the evening because I'm still having all these ideas, as you were talking about before, Tim. But it definitely has to come from the leaders. So saying to your team, and circling back to your to-do list, Jono, that you had up earlier, it might be as simple as getting your team on a call and saying, you know, I feel like I want to really clearly define my expectations of all of you. I would like you to make sure that each and every day you carve out half an hour where it's just you time. So whether that's in the middle of the day in your lunch break, you go for a walk, go walk the dog, pop out to the shop, set an appointment in the middle of the day. Obviously that's critical or within the guidelines at the moment, but saying to them, you know, set your workstation up for success, for video calls, make a coffee, make a plan for the day. We'll have our catch up in the morning and the afternoon, but don't feel that you can't carve out time for yourself during that day. You usually would anyway by taking a lunch break. But unless you define that as leaders, unless you say that to your employees, they will feel that anxiety about sitting on the couch and having a coffee, as you were talking about before, Tim. So yeah, just don't be afraid to let your team know that they're allowed to take a break.
and get the team to provide that feedback back. It's like, hey, you know, I want to provide you half an hour or an hour to do this, and this. You tell me when that time is. I'll put it in my schedule so that unless it's an emergency, I won't contact you between that. I won't send you an email. I won't send you a text. I won't send you a message on Teams. You know, there's definitely an impulse back on the team to provide that reporting.
100%. And social connection is so important, right? Too, given that we're not seeing a lot of people. So your morning tea break at home might be calling a family friend. It might be, you know, doing something to connect with others, essentially. Or a bit remote. Sorry, Jono, I'll let you.
You're right. And lucky that we've got like yourself and Tim who have an understanding of this stuff, so people can actually reach out to you guys and go, hey, I actually have no idea how to do this for my teams. I don't know how to do the wellness. I don't know how to do psychological health. I don't know how to do any of that stuff when I can't see or reach out to my teams. We're disconnected now. Can you help me out? You know, and people like you and Tim and guys at 8 Mile, that's what we do, right? We'd absolutely love to help where we can. I think we've covered most of understanding the needs of your team. You know, it's uncertain times, there's friction and all that. So what I'll do is I'll skip through that.
Can I just jump on that? Can I just jump on that, Jono, before you move?
You can, mate.
When we were talking about the expectations of 24/7 work, we learned this the hard way through trial and error because for those of you who don't know, my wife, Katie, is also the COO in our business. We both work from home, which means in the early days, BenchOn completely took over my entire life, my entire house and everything in it. And we had to learn how to put, I guess, breaks in. Otherwise, we were going to go stir crazy. So we set times where in the mornings up until, you know, we didn't start work at 6 o'clock, even though I might have had a dream about work that night, because I would block out time in the morning to spend time with my kids before they went to school. I also then blocked out from, you know, sort of 4 o'clock in the afternoon through to 7:30 at night. And that was my family time. Now I could go back to work from 7:30 to 10. And the reason for that, and it goes back to what John said before on the chat, you know, if you're a leader and you're sending emails at 1 o'clock in the morning, that sends a very clear signal to your employees as to why they aren't doing it. And that's, I guess that's an immaturity in a leader where they go, I want my employees to know how hard I work and, you know, that I'm running this place and I'm always on. But you're right, it has detrimental effects on what they expect. But with my tech team, they work best in the early hours of the night because it's quiet. They don't have to worry about their families. You know, I have one guy who, when he was in Ramadan, he only wanted to work all night and sleep all day, you know, because that was part of his culture. And, you know, so he worked all night. But all we said to the team was, I need someone on standby all day during business hours to be able to respond to bugs or client issues. But the rest of you can work when you need to. And then when there was a large body of work that I needed to do late at night with my tech team, all I did was just schedule in more family time during the day and then work with them late at night. And they were aware that I was on during that period, and that during the day I was off for a period because I was going to be working that night. So I guess understanding the needs of your team, my tech team have very different needs to my BD team who need to work during, you know, 8 to 4 business hours. And so you can balance that by just being agile and being responsive and making sure that you are communicating the blocks that you're putting in and saying, guys, this is my family time. I'll be back in 3 hours. If you need anything, text if it's urgent, but otherwise I'm out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you know what? People can schedule emails. So, you know, if you're working at a certain period of time at night and you've got ideas that need to go to your team, you can schedule it and let it go out at a reasonable hour in the morning. So, yeah, good call.
Well said.
All right, there's two slides that we've got that I really, really want to cover. We might have to do it quickly just because we're starting to run out of time. But managing the performance of your team now is as important, if not more important, in keeping that engagement with your staff. We see a lot in crisis and in large-scale change that people tend to shell up and only think about the individual. They want to protect themselves and whether they're going to be relevant in the next phase of change. That is, in my personal opinion, I think that's devastating to an organization. It's when things get hard, when things get tough, and when things are in turmoil is when you need to lean on your team. Your responsibility as a leader is still to make decisions and commit to those decisions, but you need to look at your team and developing your team so that they still have that buy-in and that connection back to the organization. Anita, why is it important? Is it important to develop? I mean, in my opinion, it is. I mean, what do you think to continually develop and educate staff?
100%, most definitely. And look, particularly in a time like this, it really instills that sense of security, safety, and company stability. And I was thinking about this last night after our conversation the other day, which was great. And it got me thinking about continuous education within a really cost-sensitive period, such as now, when, as you said, Tim, companies are looking at diminishing headcount or reducing salaries for X period of time to get through without needing to do that, which I've seen quite a few companies doing in the last 6 weeks. But on that cost-sensitive side of things from a professionally developing perspective, I was thinking ideas that you guys could do as leaders. You could have a fortnightly or weekly ideas lab where you get your entire team together and you share learnings from the week and thoughts on improvement. And it might be the smallest thing. It might be like, hey, when we get back to work, can we have a toaster in the lunchroom? It might be, hey, there's this great, great online fitness thing I thought we could all do together once a week. Or there's this free course that's coming up. I can see benefit in it for everybody. What do you all think? So just having that ideas lab, which is something we had at Virgin, we created there, and it was just hugely successful and great for encouraging that communicative, collaborative, cohesive type culture, which we all want, right?
Yeah.
Another one was choosing like a worthwhile webinar, such as this one.
Shameless.
Or does your team have hidden strengths? I mean, is someone like myself self-confessed Pilates nut for the last 10 years, and so therefore they could run a session with the team via Zoom or Teams where you're all having a stretch session or a workout for half an hour once a week, just anything to stay connected, but that also feeds into that professional development piece at the moment. And then employee engagement as an overarching piece that's definitely my jam and something I'm exceptionally passionate about, as I'm sure you can all tell right now. So, look, it's invest in your people and they'll invest in you. So yeah.
Agreed.
Well, we're almost on the, I guess, the opposite viewpoint of, the communal things, and I think this is back from my time in the army, and Johnny, you'd remember this, where you had forced socialization. Everyone Friday afternoon, we're going to the boozer, and you are going to sit there and talk to people and be social for at least 2 hours, and then you can go home. And like they would try these things, and the majority would just go, oh God, it's forced socialization, and they fought it. And then the second that their time was up, they left. And it just, to me, it didn't work. So the way that we've done our professional development style of work, rather than getting everyone in to learn at the same time on a thing, is that we, like Andrew, I think made the comment before, we treat them with maturity and say, look, as a, I guess, a leading, like, or teaching you to fish rather than giving you a fish, you are responsible for leading your own professional development. Now, we have processes in place and funding in place for each department to fund courses, and we give them time off to go and do that. But they're the ones that need to drive what they want to learn. And that's about them keeping up with the pace of the business and the changes that we're making, but also allowing them to say, well, who do I want to be as a professional, and what do I need to learn to get to that next level? And then, hey boss, there's this course coming up. It's going to take me out for 2 days, but I've talked to my team. They can cover me for that period. But what it'll do is give me these skills, which I can then apply here. And we go, yeah, great. Here's the money. Go for it. And we've found that what that does is give people more ownership of their professional development, and allows them to actually focus on it and say, well, what are my weaknesses and how can I improve on that? Because I want to get to this next level.
Yep.
Which means they have buy-in, and that they're not doing it because you've told them, and they're not going, oh, here's another one. They're actually going, if I get this, this is going to be great for me. And then they push it with passion. That's the way that we've implemented it. But that does take leadership and talking it through with them and explaining to them, because we have some people that just aren't very good at that. They just tend to just continue on at the norm.
Yep.
With regular counseling sessions, you can make them aware that, hey, by the way, you're starting to drop behind. You really need to pick this area up. And is there a way that you think that you can do that? And then they start to go, okay, well, I'm being left behind. I really need to do something. Okay. And then they come up with the action plan, and they've got the buy-in. You know, they've said, this is my plan. This is how I'm going to do it. And then we enable it. And that I've seen have really good effect, particularly in a remote work.
And Tim, that's iconic of BenchOn, and that's an organisational dependent thing. Knowing who your staff are, knowing who your teams are, and what they're capable of is, it's so important. BenchOn is known because it's known for its self-starters and people that take a lot of pride in their self-development. Other people like to wait and be told how they're going to develop themselves, but it's understanding your organisation and then pitching that correctly. And I think, mate, that's an extremely good point. And what I want to cut into now, noting the time, is just quickly why we manage performance. And this one I'll just leave with Anita, because I want to talk about courageous conversations when leaders have to have tough chats with their people who aren't performing in a remote sense. In a disconnected sense, we now have to have a difficult or a courageous conversation with someone. How? Why? And is it important to stop the rod early to remove the implications of potentially toxic situation?
Yeah. Thanks, Jono. It's exceptionally critical to make sure that us as leaders, in addition to the leaders beneath us, you might have team leaders, etc., that have flow-on teams there, that we are all exceptionally comfortable with having those courageous conversations, as you were saying. So this is
being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Definitely, yeah. But just I've done a lot of coaching on this particular side of things in the past, and I love it. I really do. Sitting down with a leader who might say to me, look, I've got these 2 people in my team. They're pretty good, but there's a few areas where they could improve, and I don't think it's time for a performance improvement plan yet. And I'd say to them, look, thanks for coming to me for starters. Let's work on this together. It's definitely something that you can get better at. You just might need a little bit of help, and that's okay. We're not all meant to be fantastic at absolutely everything. My golf game, horrendous.
So we're going to coach.
Yeah. So, I'd sit there and say to them, okay, when you bring, Jim into the room, sit down and say to Jim, you're doing a great job at the moment. Here are some areas where you are really excelling. So supporting your teammates, fantastic. Last week when you did XYZ, that was really going above and beyond, and it's certainly within the spirit of the value system of our business, etc. One thing that I did want to talk about today, and the reason for this meeting, is that last week when XYZ happened, that is not in line with where the business is heading and with our values and vision, etc. So let's just have a really comfortable conversation about that. I want to clearly understand your perspective. I'll share mine, and then let's work on some ways of improvement there. And then you finish off with the old pat on the back. If you need a hand at any point in time, or if you feel like this time frame is not achievable, or like you're not comfortable with our plan of attack here, then please reach out, or now's the time to raise your hand and let's continue the conversation. We're not in a rush today. So just as you were saying, Jono, getting really comfortable with having those conversations. Turning an underperforming team or workforce into a motivated, high-performing centre of excellence. It's an incredible achievement, and I promise you it is the best feeling as a leader. We all want our teams, or I certainly do, for everybody to be champions of better, so consistently focused on continual improvement. The only way that we can get people having those conversations upwards to their leader or within their teams is to make sure that they feel comfortable raising their hands, which sort of comes back to that trust piece as well, you know, which is another conversation. I won't get into it now because but look, as a leader, you've got a responsibility to lead. There are times to be exceptionally firm and stand firm with expectations around KPIs, and then there are times to be a little bit flexible, but seeking feedback, as Tim was saying before, from your team is very important as well. But yeah.
And you raised a good point there. When it comes to performance managing, taking it away from the individual for a second and chunking back up to the values of the organisation makes people feel safe. And I know Peter Keith is online from Change Agency, and he does a lot of work around that value-based decision making and the communication around that piece. And it really makes people a bit more comfortable and they feel less targeted.
And saying to the employee as well, or your team member, it might be simple as saying, look, is this a job that you enjoy? Because it's incredibly important to me as a leader that you're in a role where you feel engaged, where you feel satisfied, where you feel challenged. So I want to have a conversation today about whether or how you're feeling in this position. And if this role's not right for you, that is perfectly okay. But let's seek to understand what role might be right for you and whether that is in this organisation, and then we can continue our journey together. So just so many different ways to frame that conversation. But I could go on all day.
Hey, that's why you're here, and that's why you exist, and people like Peter Keith and Tim exist. You know, that's why we're here. We can provide that help and support, which leads me on to this one. You're not alone. Everyone out there, you're not alone in the journey that you're taking. There's, you know, it's not often that you get so many people put in a situation together in a period of crisis, change, chaos, and it's global. So the problems you're dealing with are not, you know, they're not your own. Like you're not by yourself. They're not your individual scenario. Everyone is dealing with it, and everyone's got a new way of dealing with it. So opening up those conversations and reaching out to people that have done this before and continue to is so important. So let's not make the mistake of thinking that we're by ourselves. This thing has global implications, and it's important. And this webinar is proof of it. This will be recorded, by the way, so everyone can access it a bit later. If you haven't registered for any future webinars from 8 Mile, I know I'm going to get Anita back on another one. Tim, are you signing up to another one as well, mate? And I'm just going to put it out there.
You told me before. I said yes.
All right, so Tim's on, which means we'll be able to get more into the weeds. I think the next one is going to be more about, hey, teams, what are teams thinking, what are they understanding, and you know, what is their responsibilities in this situation, dealing back and managing up. So we'll do that, which is important. If you want to reach out to either Anita or Tim via LinkedIn, flick them a message. With Anita, again, unicorn when it comes to the whole word nerd side of the house and being able to translate, you know, strategic to tactical documents, tender writing. If you want to look at building yourself to be a better asset to an organization, maybe not just the one you're in, but maybe one that you want to go to. Anita, she will set you on the right track and look at that recruiting space. She's perfect at it, and remove some of that anxiety and ambiguity around how are we going to move companies or move into new opportunities.
Behavioural interviews, resume,
exactly.
all sort of thing. I mean, some people haven't done an interview for 10 years. There was a project I did with Virgin Australia with their pilot workforce, some of whom were to be made redundant. And, you know, these people were often, a lot of them were my father's age, and they hadn't done an interview in 15 years. So that sense of anxiety that they felt about walking into that interview space, not understanding the difference between older style interviews and current behavioural interviews, and even how to represent themselves best in a resume form. That's,
that's your jam.
That's my jam.
And you know what? Those feelings are natural, and that's okay. But that's why we have subject matter experts like yourself here. And Tim, mate, if people are looking at understanding subcontract arrangement strategies for, not sacrificing staff for the bottom line, looking at redundancy, business continuity, if you want to know more about the platform, things like navigating those short-term contracts, which can be difficult if you're trying to build your business from scratch as well. Tim is definitely a great resource for understanding that. Tim, did you want to say anything else, mate, at this stage?
No, we're very happy to help. We've actually sort of destroyed our commercial model at the moment due to Corona, and we're just helping everyone that we can get through. So, for example, we're helping Rugby Australia for free to keep their 150 staff on the so if any of you are struggling, or you do know any companies that are struggling, or vice versa, of any companies that are going through an unprecedented, increase in their business and they need additional support, then please give me a yell, because together, collectively, companies can build the resilience to weather this storm and get through this crisis, bounce back hard on the other side, and we're here to help. So go to benchon.com and just have a look, and if you need any help, please reach out.
The network's here to help, team. And this webinar, we'll put it up, so all the details are there, and you can go back and review it as you want. And if you want, send an email through to the admin at 8thmile.com. We'll make the slides available and that sort of detail. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, there's an abundance of online content out there, and we really appreciate you coming in. Anita, Tim, always amazing to talk to you too. And the subject matter expertise that you provide is, it's second to none out there. And I get the benefit, and our 8th Mile team gets the benefit of both of you all the time. So I'm glad that you're able to share that with our audience in the 8th Mile community. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and support. I really appreciate it.
No worries, guys. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Sam, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to cut over to you, but we are completely out of time. If you have any other questions, flick them through and we'll answer it as best we can. Thank you all, and please stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.